Hey, what is going on, everyone? Happy Friday. I hope you're having a good old Friday. I'm joined today with Mike Riley of the Uninformed States of America podcast. What's going on, man? How you doing?
Oh man, I'm doing real good, Pete. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I'm really excited to be here. Thank
Heck,
you.
heck yeah, man. I'm glad to have you on, especially like that's the cool. I mean, I had a hard time. It took me forever to come up with Citizen Pete. I don't know why it's not the most creative thing, but I love the title of your show. I mean,
Thank
that's
you
just
so much,
awesome.
man. Yeah. It's the title of my show was inspired a long time ago. Me and some homies were doing a documentary about political apathy and ignorance in the United States and how it's so prevalent. Before Donald Trump got elected, I would walk through LA and ask people questions like, "Do you know who your mayor is? Do you know what the three branches of government are?" And normal people would be like, "Nah." So we
Yeah,
decided to
for
do
sure.
something called the Uninformed States of America to speak to my peoples out there who may not be so politically savvy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I used to work in the news, and one of the producers said like he would only hire people if they knew who their senators and congressional representatives were. That's a problem in California though, because there's like 50
Yeah, there's like
representatives. There's a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
them.
There's a
That,
lot of them. Yeah.
that's cool, man. And I pulled up the website here, but where can people check out the show?
Yeah, man, absolutely. You can go to the usapodcast.com and check out the show. You can also download, I have an app where you can download the app. The show is, we do it live every other Wednesday. We got a show coming up this Wednesday on March 31st if you want to check me out there. And the show is available wherever podcasts are available.
That works, man. Yeah, check you out on the good old. I do all the Apple podcast stuff. So that
Yeah.
sounds good.
Apple Podcast. That's like that one and Spotify are like my two big ones. I'm trying to navigate people towards my app because on the app you can listen live and you can comment and you can do all that other cool stuff.
No, yeah, for sure. And we're just gonna talk about whatever today. But the first thing we wanted to kind of jump into is, obviously America's recovering from another tragedy. We had the coronavirus to deal with for a long time, and now, the virus is ending, and the mass shootings seem to be coming back again in a horrible way
We're
after
going
the
back to normal.
shootings in Atlanta and Boulder, and of course, as after the shootings, after the thoughts and prayers and the condolences, then we start talking gun control. So, yeah, what do you think, man? I mean, what do you think about some of the new legislation being proposed?
Well, this is the fact. First of all, it's not necessarily new legislation or new ideas. These are ideas that we keep trying over and over and over and over and over and over again. And for some reason or another, I'm gonna go ahead and just say the Republican Party. Not trying to be, I'm not trying to diss them. I'm just being honest about it. But for that reason, we can never get this legislation passed. Gun control legislation, especially after these mass shootings happen, is an attempt to try to curb this phenomena that we have in this country of these mass shootings happening over and over and over again. Background checks, magazine limitations, things like that. I think they're pretty important. But
Yeah,
unfortunately, and this is just being real, another mass shooting happened. But I seriously don't think anything's going to be done about it.
yeah, not here. I mean, I feel more hopeful about it because another organization to add in there is the NRA, which has just been trying to stop any sort of gun legislation, but
Right.
they're a little weaker now. I believe they filed for bankruptcy during the pandemic. So there's potential that they're weaker. In general, there's less donations from politics after the Capitol riot, and
Hmm.
with Democrats, of course, owning the Senate and the House right now. I do think that unfortunately they're not going to be able to. I don't think they're right now going to pass the filibuster to push through gun legislation. They're going to try to get Republican votes. So, but that seems like the longest of shots. So
It
unfortunately, probably nothing's going to happen.
it's a long shot. A lot of that has to do with Joe Manchin,
Yep.
who's one of the U.S. senators in there. He's not very keen on trying to get any legislation passed unless he can get a ton of Republicans to go along with him, and that's just not going to happen. So ending the filibuster is something that's imperative in order to get common sense gun legislation actually passed in this country. These mass shootings, when they happen, they take an abundant amount of life. And if they're not taking life, they're really doing a lot of damage to the people that survive. This is a tragedy that keeps happening over and over and over again in this country, and doing something about it is something that is imperative. Whenever there's a situation that happens in any other arena, we do something about it. If planes were falling out of the sky, we do something about it. When there was tons of automobile accidents happening over and over again, we did something about it. We required car manufacturers to put airbags and seatbelts in every single car, and then we made it the law. Republicans, funny enough, they have this whole thing about voter fraud. They think voter fraud actually occurred when they actually can show no evidence of it, but they're definitely doing something about it. As you all know what happened in Georgia recently, they're doing all of these voter suppression laws to try to curb voter fraud, something that they can show no proof of happening. But when these mass shootings occur, they don't want to do anything about it. It really makes no sense. Not to mention all the excuses they come up with for not wanting to do something about it. Like, oh, well, the criminals will just get the guns anyway. And, you can't do anything about gun violence. And, people need their guns. I think her name is Lauren Boebert. One of these, I think she's the congresswoman from Colorado who likes to walk around toting her gun everywhere. She's one of the main kind of the loudest voices when it comes to this issue, where she's always saying things like, oh, these guns are needed. We need to have more guns. She brings her gun with her to the Capitol building. In this last shooting that happened here in Atlanta, there was a good guy with the gun that tried to go in there and rescue one of the police officers that tried to go in there. I forget the police officer's name. Sorry to say, but he was the good guy with the gun, and he was taken out. When Gabby Giffords got shot years and years and years ago, there was supposedly a good guy with the gun there, and the only reason the gunman was stopped is because he had to stop and reload, and one of the people that he actually shot was able to tackle him down. All of these hypothetical myths around why we can't actually put in some common sense gun legislation, in my personal opinion, is absolutely ridiculous.
Sure. And I definitely think, and Lauren Boebert's a very interesting case there. And I actually remember, I was making a segment where I was going to attack her because she put together a whole ad about how she's going to carry your gun to the Capitol. And then the Capitol insurrection happened. I'm like, well, maybe that's not such a bad idea. Maybe to stay armed there. Apparently, you never know what's going to happen. But, I'm with you. I definitely think if there's, whenever something like this happens, it's like, all right, do we do common sense gun legislation, or do we talk about the mental health issues? And really, we should do both. It seems that in a lot of ways we want to find the simple answer to a very complicated problem, when really we need to focus on it from several different angles. I do get the argument that some people say that some of the legislation out there technically it wouldn't immediately eliminate all of these shootings, but at this point we've got to do something. I believe the Colorado shooter, there was a law passed or something passed in that county that basically was an assault weapons ban.
Yes.
And 10 days before the shooting, the NRA filed a lawsuit to get that tossed, and the shooter bought the gun 4 days later, and then 6 days after that, shot up the grocery store there. So there's obviously things we can do about this, but unfortunately,
you brought up a really interesting point, Pete. You talked about the mental health issue. I got to say, this is true. We do need to be talking about the mental health issue. Healthcare in this country is a whole nother conversation, but it is very important. But to me, and this is just how I see it, the common denominator in all of these situations isn't necessarily mental health. The common denominator are these assault weapons, are these weapons of war that are available to civilians. You take the Las Vegas shooter, for example. He didn't have a history of mental health issues. He was just a normal guy. Till this day, we still don't know what that guy's motive was because he got killed. Sure. But the one thing that was unique about the guy was he was just a gun collector. He was somebody that collected a massive amount of guns and stockpiled on ammunition. And the weapons that he had are the type of weapons you would see out on a battlefield, with tripods and things like that. So mental health is a big problem. But if you ask me, the common denominator really is these weapons that are out here. The assault weapons ban that was put in place in the 1990s by Bill Clinton, yeah, it didn't stop all mass shootings all at once, but it definitely curbed mass shootings. And by the time it got like about 4 years into that legislation, mass shootings had gone down by like 30-something% in the country. I don't know the exact numbers. I just know it was in the 30 percentile.
It was definitely a massive drop.
Yeah, huge drop. And then when it expired during the Bush years and the Republicans said, screw it, we're not going to renew it, mass shootings went back up again. Take other countries, for example. We're not the only country that has people that are crazy and that are mentally ill. Mentally ill, the United States isn't unique for that certain situation. There are mentally ill people all over the world. There's mentally ill people in Japan. There's mentally ill people in the UK. There's mentally ill people in Australia. And you know what? They don't have the kind of mass shootings that we do. And if they do end up having one of those mass shootings, they actually do something about it. Take Canada, for example. Their last mass shooting that they had, some Yahoo was going around shooting people, I think on the road during COVID, and they said, screw it, we're banning these types of weapons. Sure. And the cool thing, the cool thing about that, the citizens of Canada were okay with that.
Yep, and that's another big thing that we'd have to figure out is how to get people on board with it, because especially I'm down here in Texas, and let me tell you, some people are like just waiting for the day to, hey, they can come get my guns. Beto, who is he's pretty actively trying to run for governor here. I think his campaign is dead on arrival since he said, hey, we're coming after your guns.
Oh yeah, we're coming for your guns. Yeah.
So that's another thing that we would really kind of need people to buy in, and so far it seems like that's a long shot.
I got to tell you, I went to Europe a couple years ago. I went to Spain, and I was sitting in one of these cafes, and I was talking to one of the only people there that spoke English, and he was very intrigued by me being an American, and we were having conversations about American culture, and he struck a huge chord with me when he asked me a question. He said, what is it about you guys and guns? How come your country and people in your country are so enthusiastic about guns? Why do you guys love guns so much? And that really made me think, he's right. This country, we have some sort of strange infatuation with guns, with killing machines, I should say, for some reason, which is what a gun is. It's a killing machine. Yep. I always love it when people say, well, cars kill people and people die from this and people die from that. The purpose of a car is to take you from one place to the other, and accidents happen. The purpose of a gun, especially ones like AR-15s and things like that, their purpose is to kill, and their purpose is to kill as many people as you possibly can within the shortest amount of time.
Sure.
But back to like what you said, yeah, you're right. It's going to take some sort of cultural enlightenment somehow for us to understand that these weapons are not things we need to have emotional attachments to. They are what they are. They're just weapons. They're tools.
Absolutely.
Meant for a specific purpose. But I can understand that. I grew up very infatuated with guns. I was a gun nut when I was a kid because my dad was a gun nut.
Sure.
My dad was one of these people where he loved shooting. He loved guns. We had all kinds of guns in the house. He would take us out shooting all the time. I started shooting when I was 7 years old. I had my dad bought me a 22 when I was younger. We had a SKS 9mm. We had all kinds of guns, and I knew a lot about guns. And not to mention, we grew up in just a gun infatuated culture. We here in America, we grew up watching Schwarzenegger and Van Damme and all them. We watched them in movies, gunning people down left and right. We're all about our outlaws in the Wild West and stuff like that. Growing up out here in Southern California, we got the ice cream trucks that come by. When we were kids, you used to get on the ice cream truck and you could buy those cap guns that were there, and we would play shooting each other in the middle of the street. It's no wonder why this country is so gun crazed. Not to mention just the myth about guns we have in this country. It's what won the revolution. It's what tamed the West. And this and this and that. All of these things are just completely off the rails when it comes to how we view guns in this country.
Absolutely, and I think it kind of ties into people's in a sense. We're so much the military is promoted so much in the country, and so it's this patriotic kind of image. And for a lot of gun owners that I know, yeah, they see themselves as like, hey, I have this to fight a tyrannical government. I mean, I don't know if they know how drones work, but they just have this mental image of themselves of like, well, you need to maintain an arsenal, you need to you need to protect yourself. And I also think there's a lot of, you touched on a little bit there, the fear mongering going on. I have a friend of mine who posted something about, he's not voting for Biden because Biden's going to come take his guns away.
Just like
And I'm
Obama
like,
did.
yeah, I'm like, yeah, where'd you hear that from? Oh, well, the NRA. And I was like, was it followed by a request for a donation? Maybe. I mean, that's big business, as far as like protecting gun rights. And so there's a lot of folks who've taken advantage of that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The NRA, and you're right, they've lost a lot of their power, especially after they got caught taking money from the Russians. But they're still pretty powerful, and they have been pushing a lot of narratives and pushing a lot of the culture surrounding guns for a very long time. I remember my father was telling me how he would never join the NRA, but I remember my father used to tell me how the NRA back in the day, they weren't so infatuated with all of this. Oh, you got to have this type of gun and you got to make sure you protect your rights and going out and fighting legislation. They were more about gun safety. They were more about teaching kids and not teaching kids, but teaching people about hunting and stuff like that. They weren't this crazed gun club like they are now. But starting sometime in the 1980s, they started pushing this narrative that you need your gun to fight a tyrannical government. You need your gun just in case the government gets too big and gets too ruly and you got to go up against them. This is, and they try to make it seem like this is something that the forefathers wrote the Second Amendment for. First of all, you can look it up. I've read all the Federalist Papers, all of the letters that were sent back and forth between Patrick Henry and whoever else the case may be. I've read them all. Nowhere ever in there did they ever mention or even hint at the idea of writing this amendment for the purposes of ordinary citizens rising up against their tyrannical government. That's just something that just never happened. There's never, ever in the history of this country been a popular or been a successful insurrection.
Well, I do got you on that one though. There was one. It's a bad story, but yeah, I think it's Hamilton I talked about. I think he wrote the Federalist Paper on the Second Amendment, right. And yeah, what he was talking about was people say, okay, the right of gun ownership will not be infringed upon, but they want to yada yada over the well-regulated militia part. And right. Really, what he was talking about in his Federalist Paper, I believe, was that he was basically advocating for the National Guard, essentially. More like states having their own militia and them being like the national army. But there was an actual insurrection. I did a segment on a couple of months ago in, I believe it was North Carolina. This was in the Reconstruction period after the Civil War. It was after the Union Army left. And, there were a bunch of African Americans that were able to vote in a town. Mm-hmm. And were able to actually get some political power. I believe they, elected a black mayor, right. Elected a couple of black city councilors. And so the white people in the area actually went and stormed their capital and made everyone resign at gunpoint. And, and that's what happened. There was no federal government to the rescue. Right. They basically took over the town. But obviously that was in the late 1800s. So there has been no successful modern insurrection.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly. But, yeah. Okay. Well then, yeah, absolutely. I definitely stand corrected. Although there's never been a successful insurrection to take over the United States government.
Oh, absolutely not. They could try though. They're gonna need a lot more than a couple of crazy people at the Capitol.
Yeah. Yeah. Look what happened there, and this is just to remind people, you're not going to overthrow the United States government with your AR-15. Always remember, the United States military already goes up against full-blown armies who have access to weapons that you'll never have access to, and they win. So for anybody who thinks that they're going to be able to overthrow their tyrannical government with your AR-15, that is literally an NRA fantasy that is going through your head. And speaking of the Second Amendment, you're absolutely right about that. The Second Amendment was written at a time, it was written in 1785. And at that time, we didn't have any standing army in the United States. There was a huge debate with Thomas Jefferson. He didn't want any standing armies in the United States because standing armies usually led to military coups. And when the Constitution was written, it was written in mind with they were asking, okay, how are we going to fund a military? So they decided to do state militias. And when the War of 1812 happened, they decided to exile that, because we didn't have the military power ready to go up against the British when they invaded the United States at that time from Canada. So after the War of 1812, we said, okay, we'll have a standing army, and then we'll question if we're going to fund it every 2 years or not. But look at the modern day times. First of all, the Second Amendment, if you ask me, and I say this all the time, it needs to be repealed and replaced. And the reason why, I'm not saying that no, there shouldn't be, people shouldn't have the right to own a gun. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is the Second Amendment is extremely ambiguous, and it's always left up it's always left to interpretation. Look at the I think it was the Heller decision with Scalia in 2008. I think Anthony Scalia gave the dissent for that Supreme Court decision. I think this was the whole Supreme Court case was about whether in Washington D.C. whether the Constitution gave people or whether the Second Amendment actually states that individual citizens have a right to carry a gun for self-defense. And people, I think it was Heller who was arguing against that, saying that the Constitution doesn't state that at all. A well-regulated militia necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right for the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A well-regulated, first, like I said, that's extremely ambiguous. That sounds like something out of the King James version of the Bible, if you ask me.
Yeah, like you could really interpret that a ton of different ways.
Interpret that in a million different ways.
And I'm actually glad you reminded me of something. Not to cut you off there, but
no, that's all good.
When you're talking about when they actually did write the Second Amendment, when we first wrote the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all came together. You reminded me of another kind of crazy story from, I believe it was the First Continental Congress when the government was in Philadelphia. And, I'm sure maybe some history buffs out there could correct me on the specifics of this, but essentially, Alexander Hamilton, he was there, and the remnants of the, the Continental Army that fought in the Revolutionary War, right, was waiting to get paid, and Congress was originally trying to figure out how do we pay them for the Revolutionary War, and so a couple of garrisons or a couple of the Revolutionary soldiers actually went to Philadelphia and surrounded Congress at the time and demanded to get paid. And wow. Alexander Hamilton had to go out there and negotiate with them and get them to, step back. So that's maybe where some of the distrust from the actual military came from. But again, that was 200 years ago. And actually, if we're talking Continental, that's, we're like 230 years or something like that ago. So 250 years ago. So the idea that would apply today doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, exactly. And, and for a lot of people with this idea and this notion that the Second Amendment is giving you, these specific rights to own, these types of weapons, I would challenge them. The Second Amendment is not an unlimited right, much like most of our other rights. There are a lot of weapons out there that you aren't allowed to own, so the fact that people have such a challenge against like an assault weapons ban is really peculiar to me. And a lot of people look at it like, well, we're the United States of America. The Second Amendment is what makes us unique. No, I think it's our infatuation with guns that makes us unique. There are very few countries in the world, very, very few. And I think there's maybe 2 or 3 out of all the countries in the world where, where you don't have the right to own a gun. Sure.
Most countries in the world, you have the right to own a gun, but it's just not as easy to get one.
And it's very, very culturally. I don't know if you've ever heard Jim Jeffries' segment on this, but it's very, very not politically correct. But he makes the point they don't have to worry about a lot of crazy people getting guns, because if you wanted to buy an AR-15 in Australia, it's $45,000. Yeah. And he makes the joke that someone with Down syndrome or having a mental crisis probably doesn't have $45,000 in cash on them to go get a assault weapon. But yeah, you look at it's hard. Obviously the rest of the world, like you mentioned before, China or Japan, and there's incidents with like a mass stabbing incident, people going around saying a bunch of people, but by and large there aren't the same kind of mass casualty events that we have here in the United States, and that's because guns are so readily available. Exactly. And I think the gun laws in California are very. In Texas, you can pretty much, you can more or less get anything. And really, the other thing I think that is kind of ridiculous about this argument for gun legislation is that most gun owners that I know, like, and crazy, like gun nut owners, like make their own ammunition crazy. Like they're for like more legislation. They're like, some of the stuff out here is insane. And honestly, they love guns so much they don't mind jumping through those hurdles.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
I got a friend who was one of the last guys to get a silencer with the silencer loophole,
Oh, wow.
because he actually formed a estate, and the estate owned the silencer, not him. And so, I mean, if you are a gun enthusiast, like a responsible gun owner out there, I mean, there's people don't mind jumping through hoops to get some of that stuff. By and large, it just becomes so political when people start, you're infringed upon my rights that are really, as you mentioned before, they're privileges.
They literally are privileges.
Absolutely.
And you're absolutely right about that. One of my best friends was a former Marine. He went out there. He was in Iraq and Fallujah and all these other places. And he's kind of a gun person. Kind of one of these people that loves guns. He takes me target shooting all the time, and I enjoy target shooting. I think it's actually pretty fun. But he is the same way. He's saying, like, look, I don't need this type of gun. I don't need an AR-15 style weapon. I know there's, it's not just AR-15s, but the ones that are like AR-15s. You know what I'm saying? I don't need a weapon like that for home defense. And yes, if I have to jump through a few hurdles just so I can have this weapon, I don't mind doing that. The entire country agrees that if you are going to be out there on the road driving, you should be licensed. Your car should be registered with the government, and you should have liability insurance. Nobody seems to have a problem with that, and the reason why is because a car can kill you. The wrong person who doesn't know how to operate a motor vehicle can be a very, very, very deadly person. How come it can't be the same thing with these weapons? License, registration, and insurance. That is very, very common sense gun legislation. And I forget which country it is. I think it's Sweden or one of the Scandinavian countries.
One of the cold ones.
Yeah, one of the real cold ones. Yeah, where like the sun stays up for like 6 months at a time or whatever.
Right.
But they, in one of those countries, if you want to own a gun, you have to. I don't think they do liability insurance, but you have to have it licensed.
Yep.
You have to have it registered. You have to show that you have competency when it comes to using that weapon. Not only that, but you also have to show a need for the weapon. You got to give a good reason why you need it. Are you a security guard? Are you somebody who works in law enforcement? Is somebody threatening to kill you?
Yeah. There has to be an after. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and that's another issue that that has really popped up. I mean, the Newtown shooting. That was someone, I can't remember the shooter's name, but his mom, was a gun nut, and it really, you don't want to put the blame on someone who's passed, but so her son had a lot of mental issues, right? And to bond with him, she was like, all right, well, she was in the shooting, she took him shooting, taught him how to shoot, and the mental problems got worse, and she decided to have him committed. He found out about this, shot her, and she volunteered at the school, and that's why he went to the school and shot up a ton of kids, But the recklessness on her part of, teaching him how to shoot with all these assault weapons, it's just mind-boggling to me.
It is, and and that's the reason why I think liability insurance is it would be such a good thing when it comes to this issue. Because if you kill somebody with these guns, it makes you liable. It makes you responsible.
Yeah, it makes you think about it.
Yeah, it'll make you think about it. And at the end of the day, if the mom had to get liability insurance on every single one of those weapons that she purchased, and she knew that if my son kills somebody with these weapons, that I'm liable, she probably may have not taken him out to shoot so much or taught him how to shoot so much. That was the same thing with the Virginia Tech shooter, which is another reason why we need universal background checks. Because if I'm not mistaken, the state where he came from, he had been declared of having mental health issues, and he wasn't able to buy a gun in that state. But when he went to Virginia, because we don't have universal background checks, he was able to buy the gun there, and he was able to get all those people there. So, all of these common sense gun legislation things that we're talking about, I really don't understand the reason why gun owners or the people out there who are screaming, well, this is infringing on my rights and whatnot. I really don't understand why they wouldn't be in favor of things like this. I mean, at the end of the day, things like this protect us all, just like the cars out there. You know what I mean? I'm not saying
Absolutely.
car accidents don't happen, but if you get into a car accident, you best believe the person that hits you more than likely has insurance.
Oh yeah, they got insurance. They got, you probably have to have your seatbelt on, which is going to protect you.
Exactly.
There's cars have, they have airbags. They have safety standards that they have to do to protect you. So it's a good comparison there.
Man,
Absolutely. And I think a big reason why, we just can't have these common sense things. There's just so many politics around it.
Exactly.
And that's a horrible part. I mean, if
the funny thing, Ted Cruz, I can't remember if it was today or yesterday, but he actually said, he had the nerve to say, owning a car should be just as easy as owning a gun should be just as easy as owning a car. And it's like, you can't own a car, or you can't drive a car without registration, insurance, and licensing.
And buying a car, I mean, you need a title. It's a whole thing. My wife last year, she got a car without a title. It was a friend of ours, was like a family friend, and getting that title was a pain in the ass. If she just bought a gun, no problem at all.
Yeah, take it. Here you go.
Oh yeah, we had to get like a bond. We had to do all kinds of crazy crap.
That's great. And in a lot of states, you can walk in. You can't do this here in California, but in a lot of states, you can go into the store, buy the gun, and walk out with it the same day. That to me is a completely irresponsible.
That makes no sense. And here in Texas, I think you can. I don't know if they closed the loophole yet, but I think at one point very recently, you can go to a gun show and buy a gun and not need any documentation or anything at all. You just walk out with it. Yeah,
absolutely. The crazy thing about the NRA is any time somebody brings up one of these issues or brings up one of these common sense gun legislation ideas, they always have the nerve to step in and say, well, you can't do stuff like that. You'd be infringing on people's rights. There's, I forget which company it is, but they make what are called smart guns. You know how like in certain cars, you can't turn the car on unless you got the key in your pocket? Well, they got guns where the trigger won't fire unless you are wearing like a specific ring, or if you're wearing like a necklace or something like that, where it allows the trigger to fire much like a gun. I forget what the technology is called, but those types of things are available. And when it was suggested that maybe we should treat all guns this way, maybe we should pass a law to manufacture all guns this way so they don't fall into the wrong hands, so stolen weapons aren't used to kill people. The NRA had the nerve to step in and say, no, you can't do stuff like that. That's infringing on people's rights. How could that possibly be infringing on anybody's rights? That's just enacting more gun safety measures. That's not infringing on your rights. I just don't. The NRA and the gun and the gun lobby and all these gun manufacturers, they have a lot of blood on their hands. I really believe that they do. And what's crazy? There's also a law out there. I think it's a federal law, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe all the law experts who are listening to this can correct me if I'm wrong. But there's a law out there saying you can't even sue the gun manufacturers. Because I think it was after Stoneman Douglas. I think a lot of the parents there were like, we're suing these gun manufacturers who are making these guns, and they can't sue them.
Liability protection, can't do it.
Can't do it. They're straight up MC Hammer. You can't touch this. You know what I mean?
And I've told my friends who's nice. I've told my buddy, is the gun nut. I'm like, hey, the pendulum always swings in politics, right? I mean, I do think that we're in this weird political polarized time where it's hard for anything to get done, but eventually when things do get done, they might not look how he wants them to. Like, if people gave a little bit on some of these gun legislation things, all right, universal background checks, I think everyone can agree with that. I really like the idea of people having to show ID and stuff like that to get ammo, not being able to buy a certain amount of ammo on per day,
Right.
So there's a lot of common sense things that we can do, and things that, I have gun nut friends that they agree with. And I try to tell them that, like, hey, you have to understand, if we don't do something that you agree with now, we're going to do something that you really don't agree with later. Because these mass shootings aren't stopping, and if anything, they're getting worse and worse and worse.
And and I really do wonder what it's going to take for people to understand the power that these weapons have and the impact that they have. I was listening to a radio show the other day, and they had mentioned something that I thought was really really good. Uh, uh, Everybody knows the story of Emmett Till. Everybody knows the story about how in 1955 this young black boy was from Chicago went down to Mississippi to go visit his family, and he whistled at a white woman or something like that. And the husband of the woman he whistled at, another guy went and kidnapped him and tied a fan to him, beat him bloodily, and threw his body in the river. Right. And so his mother wanted to have an open casket after that, because she wanted to show people what they did to her baby. And Jet Magazine went in there and they took that photograph of Emmett Till, of his mutilated body, and it went viral. And this was in the 1950s, and it sent shockwaves throughout the entire country. It's one of the things that sparked the civil rights movement.
Yep.
Media purposely will not show the dead bodies. You never see this stuff on the media. I wonder if that's what it's going to take. I wonder if it's going to have to take like an Emmett Till moment. Maybe we should show what these bullets do to people. What AR-15 bullets do to flesh, and see the horror that happens when people get shot up. It's not like in the Western movies where it's like, bam, oh, you got me, and you fall over.
Right.
No. These things tear people up.
Absolutely.
It is
and
horrific.
I think I would challenge anyone out there who is against any kind of gun legislation to read the stories from Newtown. Read the stories from that shooting. The kindergarten kids talking about, trying to send a last message to their parents, talking about watching their friends die. Maybe we do need some kind of an Emmett Till moment to really shock people. And I think that was the closest that we got towards actually doing something.
Yeah.
But we still
got shot because kids died. And, and this time it wasn't adults. It was children who were just at school. So and it really put the notion out there that it's hard to feel like you're safe anywhere in this country. You can go into a movie theater, get shot. You can go to the grocery store, get shot. You can be at school or at work, and some crazy person walks in and you can get popped. And all these people who have this idea that, well, that means we should have more guns. We should have, armed police officers. We should arm teachers. We should arm all these people in order to stop these shootings from happening. Listen, I don't think it takes anybody who has some sort of degree from Harvard to understand this.
It's pure common sense.
Pure common sense. If you have more cars on the road, like out here in LA, if you have more cars, if you have cars everywhere, you're going to get more car accidents, right?
Yep. And it's just, people forget about, think about what the real world is. I mean, people throw their common sense out there. I was a bit of a jokester in school. Kids are cruel. Kids are mean. Let's give the teacher a gun and see what happens next time, some of these kids start acting up.
Homie, no way.
Yeah.
That would be so scary. I was the same way. I was a little jokester and a class clown and all that, even though I cracked my teachers up half the time. A lot of them got frustrated.
If they laugh, you're cool. If not, I made it. Dodged a swing or two, here and there.
Yeah. Exactly.
So give them a gun and see what happens.
I knew a lot of kids that, when I was in middle school, one of the middle school students tried to fight, physically get into it with one of the teachers there. And the teacher got into it with the student. They got into an actual fist fight. Teacher got fired, of course. But could you imagine if that teacher had just lost his mind and went for that gun? You know what I mean? And not to mention, people act like, what are you supposed to do? Walk around with it on strapped to the side of your hip like you're in a Western movie? When somebody's walking in and shooting at you, it's kind of hard to, to think straight. Oh, let me go in here, unlock my gun safe, grab my gun, put the ammunition in it, cock it, and shoot back at this person.
Yeah.
All of these things, I think that people think, first of all, a lot of them are myths. Very, very, very rarely are people stopping other people with their guns. You know what I mean? It happens. It just doesn't happen often.
It is very rarely. And it's, I actually think, Ben Shapiro's Daily Caller, they're putting together a movie about a mass shooting at a school, and it's one of these, Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous because the whole movie is about this girl who is able to, oh, she knows her way around guns, is able to like save the school, but like it makes it seem as if like a mass shooting at a school is like this long drawn, like they're taking hostages. This whole situation. It's like
Oh yeah,
they're over in like 5 minutes. You know,
yeah,
just
yeah.
doesn't make any sense. And you talk
And
about putting too much stuff on your teachers. Like, all right, now they got to be RoboCop too.
yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? Like that just
My
makes no
sister
sense.
is a teacher. My mother is a teacher. They've been in the class. They didn't sign up for the. This is not what they signed up for.
Oh yeah.
They didn't sign up to be soldiers. They're educators. And listen, I've talked to people who have had to shoot at people shooting back at them. Not like illegally. I'm talking about people in the military and people in law enforcement.
Oh sure, yeah.
And I'm gonna tell you right now, it's not like how you think it is in the movies. Shooting at someone who's shooting at you is in trying to hit them is it's just like it's not as easy as you think. Most people who go out and shoot and practice shooting, they're shooting at still targets that don't move and that are not shooting back at you. But when you're in a situation where, first of all, these mass shooters, they're not interested in taking hostages. They're interested in taking life. When you're taking hostages, you have demands. You want a plane or some money or something like that. That is not what these people are interested in. The only thing they're interested in is killing as many people as they possibly can. So this whole notion that somebody's going to take hostages is something else. But shooting accurately at somebody who's shooting back at you, when these people are shooting at you and you think that you can just pull out your gun and start shooting back, you can inadvertently hit and kill people who have nothing to do with it. And if everybody's got a gun, you don't know who's shooting at who. This was one of the big problems that took place during the Las Vegas shooting. He was shooting from the top of a hotel room, and nobody knew. Law enforcement was like, who's the person that's shooting? So they're pointing their gun at every other person, trying to figure out who's who. Good thing they're law enforcement.
Yeah, able to figure it out.
Understand, but still, I mean, what we need to do is we need to try our best as a society, to try our best to reduce the number of guns that are within our country, within our society. I ask people this question all the time. Do you really want to live in a world where you feel like you need a gun?
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, people are like, no.
Yeah,
Like,
it's weird. You see like people who are like so terrified that they got to carry a gun on them everywhere. Like they just got to be ready to, any time to whip it on out. Yeah.
It's like Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock mention this all the time. I don't like guns, but I got one just to even the playing field.
Sure, yeah.
It's something I can completely understand.
Absolutely.
Because this is America. Hell, everybody's strapped. There's more guns in this country than there are people.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah. And I'm telling you right now, all the guns that are in this country, does it make this country any safer?
No. And in a way, people make that argument like, oh, we just need more guns. I think we probably have more guns now than we've ever had. You mentioned the assault weapons ban ending after Bill Clinton. And I believe, I might mess up my numbers on this, but when Bill Clinton signed that into law, I think there were like an estimated 30 million guns in the country. And now we're over 300 million. So there's a gun for like every man, woman, child.
And pet. And all of that.
I know. If I can get my dog strapped up, get him a little turret or something, he can run around, chase some squirrels or something like that,
Exactly. Go squirrel hunting.
Oh, yeah, man.
Yeah. There are guns galore in this country, and reducing the number of guns, just as a collective society, reducing the number of guns in this country, just like we did when we collectively came together and said we don't need as many cars around. Cars need liability insurance, and they need things like that, and and you have to be licensed to drive it. We as a society collectively came together and said, you know what, it's probably a good idea. I don't understand why we can't do the same thing for guns. We need to have a war on guns. And before people sit here and say, well, the war on drugs doesn't work and the war on prohibition didn't work, and so what makes you think the war on guns is going to work? I look at that like it's a false equivalency.
Sure.
False equivalency. We can definitely take this on. And part of the war on guns that we need to have is changing our infatuation that we have with them in this country. I'm not saying we need to ban guns or ban all guns. We need to definitely ban certain types of weapons, like assault weapons. We definitely need to ban those. But what we really need to do like I said before, as a country, we need to have a come to Jesus moment about our relationship with these killing machines.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And there's there's a lot of options out there. People argue so much about like, do we do this, do we do that? Let's just start doing stuff and see what works.
Do something.
Absolutely.
Do something.
So, and another thing I wanted to, I didn't want to just talk about guns. I wanted to, see what else you kind of think going on around politics. And talk a little good old Joe Biden. Have you? What do you think so far of his presidency?
So far I think it's so good. So far I think he's doing a pretty good job. I'm gonna tell you right now. In when things first started, Joe was not my guy. Especially during the primaries. I had my doubts. But Joe Biden has really surprised me in a good way. I'm pleasantly surprised by his performance. With him getting more than 200 million vaccines that are coming out, and him taking this virus actually seriously and actually doing something about it. The executive orders that he's passed, I think, are pretty good. His ideas, I think, are actually progressive, forward-thinking ideas. A lot of the legislation that he wants to pass, he's actually interested in doing something about these weapons. He's actually interested in getting infrastructure done. One of the things I'm a little iffy about is what's going on right now at the border. Of course, I don't think this is a crisis that he manufactured, like the Republicans like to say. I don't believe that at all. But at the same time, I think they're kind of nothing to kind of see here kind of attitude about it.
Yeah,
is a little suspect. But at the end of the day, things like that are going to happen. I don't think anybody's ever had a perfect presidency. We got to take things as they kind of come, on a case-by-case basis. And I think the most important thing to do is to make progress on situations. And I believe we are making progress. I don't think in the last presidency, when we were under Donald Trump, I really don't think any progress was really made. There was some progress, I don't know, in some areas. He did some cool things for the military. We got a Space Force.
Yeah, we got Space Force. I guess he did some. I mean, there's some things I like that he did. And I will admit he doesn't get credit for some of the things. Like one of the things I really like, it's something no one ever talks about. But one of the things he did, my favorite thing that he maybe did was he made it so hospitals had to actually report how much certain procedures cost, so people can kind of look around and see, okay, like this hospital is charging ridiculous numbers for this. Also, I worked with a lot of nonprofits around sex trafficking. He shut down Backpage and other websites, so he did some good stuff. But yeah, by and large, a president, you never know what he's really going to face. I mean, if I don't think Trump was probably not asked once about what would you do if there was a global pandemic back in the 2016 election, and he probably wouldn't have had a good answer for it because he, might have said injecting some disinfectant back then.
And not to mention his hubris. To me, was one of his biggest downfalls. For him to kind of brush off the pandemic and throw away the pandemic plan book that Barack Obama had left for him, and for him to kind of breeze it off like, oh, it'll go away pretty soon, and there's really nothing to worry about. I think that literally was the thorn in his side. I think that was the thing that really messed him up, and it's still messing him up. His hubris and his lying and his tendency to try to bolster his hyperbolic statements and all the other things that he does. I mean, I had a lot of shocking moments when it came to Donald Trump, but the biggest shocker for me of all was the election. I can't believe he sat up here and tried to push this idea that the election was stolen from him. I still can't believe what he did to Raffensperger, or whatever the Secretary of State's name there is down in Georgia. Yeah, good old Brad. You try to punk him into finding more votes. I was like, what?
But the funniest thing to me about that is he tweeted out something attacking, Brad's brother is an implant from China, and it's like, Brad Raffensperger doesn't have a brother.
Yeah.
But it's I mean, and for me, the big thing I'm enjoying so much about the Biden presidency now, and that in a lot of ways, Trump never stopped campaigning, right? He never stopped playing politics. And that's what really killed us with the coronavirus, because if there
Yeah,
was something that happened with a red state, he would jump on it. But if it was in a blue state,
yeah,
I mean, he kind of looked at that as politically, that's good for him. I mean, if the coronavirus is ravaging California or
hmm
LA or New York,
yeah,
like,
exactly.
that's good for him politically. And he never stopped doing that. Whereas, Biden, the biggest attack against him was that he's been in government for 47 years, and it shows. I mean, it's kind
Yeah,
of like, he's really able to navigate the government well, and is able to kind of get things going when it seemed like, Trump was president just to be president. He didn't show up with a real agenda of any kind.
man, he turned it into a reality show for himself because I
Absolutely.
think that's something that he's just so accustomed to doing. That's one thing I love about Joe is that Joe isn't all about the glitz and the glamour and the tweets and the rallies and all these other things that feed into his ego. He just wants to get the job done. And
Absolutely.
that's something that is imperative. It's paramount when you're working in government. I work around a lot of people in government, especially out here in LA. And I got to tell you, man, Washington is the new Hollywood. A lot of people jump into it because they think it's their opportunity to get rich, it's their opportunity to get famous, it's their opportunity to get attention, and it's their opportunity to have some power. I'm telling you. And that is not something that you should be getting into public service to do. You should be getting into public service to do that. Just that is to serve the public. That's one of the things I liked about our governor's predecessor, Gavin Newsom's predecessor, Jerry Brown.
Oh
To
yeah.
me,
Yep.
he was a very I just need to get shit. Excuse me, I don't know if you can cuss on here.
Oh, you
Sorry.
can say whatever the hell you want. It's
Okay,
all
okay.
good.
I forgot that.
YouTube ain't shut my shit down yet.
Yeah,
So.
exactly.
But yeah, I mean, it seems like on the Democrat side, there's a policy there. There's an actual agenda there.
Mhm.
And the Democratic lawmakers themselves, where it seems as Republicans, they're just trying to constantly fight everything. And even Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz, I think, has a podcast. I'm like, I mean,
Yeah,
everyone has a podcast nowadays, but
yeah,
for
man.
real. And I will say, I do think some of the media kind of fits into this. I don't know if you watch Bill Maher, but I'm a huge fan of his. But he
Yeah,
had
yeah, man.
Republican strategist Steve Schmidt on, who's like a regular commentator on
Yeah,
MSNBC,
yeah.
and he's very conservative. He was John McCain's campaign manager, and he's been on MSNBC for 5 years, and he has yet to have a single policy discussion. And it's just they just bring him on just to talk about Trump, and it
Yeah,
seems like
yeah.
in politics people don't really discuss policies much anymore. Differences on policy. It's all about cancel culture or Looney
Oh yeah,
Tunes or not
yeah,
what the issues are. I mean, even the stuff at the border. I mean, obviously that's a huge problem. I mean, that's something that's it's not good. But for average everyday Americans, they're like, okay, I mean that sucks, but also like, how are you going to get my wages up? How are you going to make
yeah.
sure my job doesn't go overseas? Like,
Right,
we don't
exactly.
focus on enough of that.
No, we don't focus. And that's the thing about the media. They're very complicit in this. They focus so much on a lot of the salacious stuff, on a lot of the sensationalism. I'm one of these people where people are always asking me to talk about the media on my show and talk about the media and all this other stuff. And I'm really not big on doing that. But I think the reason why is because me personally, I see the media for what it is. It's infotainment. They're trying to keep your eyes glued to the screen. It's not necessarily news. News is this is what happened. Something happened and this is what happened.
Yep.
Infotainment is something happened. Hey, here's 7 people to give their opinion on it. And a lot of these news stations are just complicit on focusing on a lot of the salacious stuff. I can't tell you how much Fox News focused on Joe Biden's press conference the other day. They got whole news shows carved out to talk about, oh, we think he's cognitively declining, and I can't believe he fell down the stairs on Air Force One. I mean, they're giving whole speeches and talks about this, and that ends up becoming the narrative that a lot of people end up talking about. They
Oh
think
yeah.
that's what policy and politics and government is all about. It's all about, who cheated on who and who did this and who fell down the stairs and who tweeted this. No, we should be talking about how we're going to get wages raised. We need to be talking about how we're going to get infrastructure moving in this country. Unfortunately, a lot of these topics just aren't very sexy. as people say. And so the media, of course, they're not going to focus on that. They're going to focus on the thing. It's like professional wrestling. They're gonna try to create some drama around it. Professional wrestling, I don't think would have the same amount of fanfare if there wasn't the dramatization, if the theatrics weren't
the sensationalism behind it.
Yeah.
Now, when you first mentioned that, for some reason in my mind, I jumped into like, maybe we can get like Tucker Carlson and like Rachel Maddow in the ring and see what happens. I'd love to watch that. My money's on Rachel, I think.
Oh, my money's totally on Rachel.
Oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, I actually worked in the news for a little bit a couple years ago, so I talk about it every once in a while I've done a couple segments on here, but yeah, I always frame it in that people want the news and they want the media to be like just facts, journalism, tell me what's going on, but it's a business.
Oh,
I mean, they got to make money. They got to sell ads.
Make money. Yeah. It's all about making money. Of course, they got to make money, and they're going to pick whatever formula that they know works in order to keep the money coming in. I mean, Fox News knows who their core audience is. They know that their core audience is the conservative base, so they're going to cater to that. They're going to bring on, like you said, the commentators, where they're not going to sit up here and talk about the policies that Donald Trump was passing that were crippling this country, or the things that Donald Trump was doing was crippling in this country. They're going to bring on somebody to talk about all the things that the liberals and the left are doing. Let's talk about cancel culture and how bad it is. Same thing with CNN or MSNBC. Like you said, they're going to bring Steve Schmidt on. They don't want to ask Steve Schmidt about policy. They want to ask Steve Schmidt, well, you're a Republican. What do you think about all these horrible things that Donald Trump is doing? That's not, and at the end of the day, like a person like myself, I love watching stuff like that because to me, it's like the ESPN of politics. You know what I mean? It's like SportsCenter. I can sit there and watch them talk about these types of things all day. But I know that that's what they're going for. I know that they're going to I know they're trying to entertain me with the information. They're not trying to just inform me about what's going on and letting me form my own analysis of it based upon what I'm hearing. They're trying to fit the narrative. And I don't think they necessarily have a political agenda. CNN, they were hell-bent on getting Donald Trump out, but
they did not seem to be fans. And I have told people too that working in the news, I remember the night when Trump won, and it was we got a stern talking to from our news director saying, hey, we got to be fair, we got to be balanced, like we can't, because people were. It was you could hear a pin drop in the newsroom. People were I mean there is that aspect there, but by and large, this is about making money. I mean, if Fox News had someone came on that was like, that press conference from good old Joe, I mean, it wasn't too bad. It was all good. I mean, they would not be on Fox News again because what are you going to talk about?
Because what are you going to talk about? Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of news is led by, people don't realize that it's how much it's led by the audience, really. Because again, we're trying to sell ads here. When I worked at this news station, it was around when Obamacare came out. And we sent a reporter, like Obama, the administration. It's another thing. They did things well. They had a reporter boot camp because they had to. All right, we need to explain this new healthcare system. So they had reporters from all over the country come to DC. They taught them all about the CAT Act, and we ran a bunch of segments on. We spent all kinds of time and money and effort doing this, and we can track the numbers by the minute. And a minute into this thing, just the numbers tanked. People didn't care. They moved on to something else. Yeah, and by day 2 or 3, we just scrapped the whole thing. Like, the story in news is if it bleeds, it leads, and people say they don't like it, but the numbers show otherwise.
Oh yeah, I mean, hell, I'll be the first person to admit it. I'm all about fist fights and car wrecks. You know what I mean? I love saying like, whoa, what's going on over there? I'm no different than anybody else. I try not to get caught up in it, but I completely do. And at the end of the day, I think these people that run these news organizations and that run these media outlets, they understand human psychology to the point where we know what people are going to glue their eyes on. Hell, after Donald Trump, after Joe Biden was inaugurated, Joe Biden's a little bit, he's a boring guy. You know what I mean? With all due respect to Joe, you're not getting all the bells and whistles that you got with Donald Trump.
Yeah. I guarantee you he has no clue what a tweet, or how to do a tweet.
Yeah, or whatever.
Or how to do an Instagram,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So after Joe Biden was elected or inaugurated, well, we can't talk about the crazy thing Joe Biden just said. So now we're just gonna go right back to Trump, and they're sitting there focusing on Trump. Trump ain't even in office no more. He can't tweet no more. But we're still gonna, keep the eye on him because he's the one that's selling the records here. You know what I mean? So
for now, I'm like, he's just another Florida man. He's just another crazy guy in Florida. Yeah, he'll show up in the news, do a crazy thing here and there, but that's what Florida men do.
Shutting down his resort because there was a COVID outbreak. So
yeah. For real funny how it's like when it was on the federal government and they had COVID. He's like, everyone come on into the White House, the workers. You still got work to do. But when it happens in his house, it's like, everyone go home. Everyone go home.
Yeah, everybody go home.
There we go. Well, hey man, this has been a good time talking with you. We've kind of gone on for a little longer than I usually do. Man, it was good. It was a good conversation.
It was a great conversation, a very educational one, a very constructive one. I hope your listeners and your viewers were able to gain something from it. Thank you so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
For sure. And last thing before I let you go, I want to make sure people know where they can find the podcast, where they can download it.
Absolutely. You can go to the usapodcast.com and you can check me out there. You can download the podcast. You can listen to all the episodes, check out some of the bonus content. Make sure that you subscribe and sign up for our newsletter. We call ourselves the Info Click. So please sign up for that. I'm available anywhere podcasts are available, and you can follow me on all social media outlets. I'm at Mike Riley Now, just how it's spelled.
Right on. I'm going to go do that right after this. Well, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it.
Man, Pete, thank you so much, my brother. God bless you. Thank you so much.
For sure. Take it easy. And all you guys out there, thanks for watching.